move on to the next slide. Gosh, I'm struggling with Canva. Right, agenda. So what we're talking about today is why you might want a supported software catalog. So the benefits of one, how you get started, how we build it, and how we use it and maintain it. So those are the 4 sections of the talk today. So let's have a quick think about why you might want a supported software catalog. A supported software catalog is a way of collating all the information about all the software that you are authorized to use within your environment or within your organization. So it is a way of identifying the software that is used within your organization or can be used. And it stores data and information about that software that is consumed by other processes throughout the software's life cycle. So because of these 2 functions, so one is identification and one is a repository for data and information, it's actually a critical entity for many IT asset management processes. So many processes call on the data within the supported software catalog, and many processes will act to update the data within the catalog as well. So if a process needs to know what software can be used in a particular scenario, who can use it, what version should be installed, all of that good information, the SSC will be the repository or the entity which contains that information. But an SCC is not many things. And the first and foremost one that it isn't is a service catalogue. And a lot of organisations get confused between the different types of catalogues that they need to have within their organisation. There's actually a bit of a hierarchy of catalogues as well, and a service catalogue sits at the top. So a service catalogue is looking at it from an end user or a business perspective, all of the things that your technology needs to do within an organisation for your organisation to be successful and to survive as an organisation. So, but often what people think of as a service catalogue is that somebody can go and request something. So that's not actually what an IT service is. So your service catalogue will be things like your ERP system or your CRM system, or you can even take it a level above and think about, okay, what services does the ERP system provide? It might provide the ability to raise purchase orders or to pay invoices or to prepare the annual accounts. So from a business perspective, those activities are the business services, but the ERP is the IT service that provides the ability to perform those business services. And the service catalogue operates at either of those 2 levels to define the services that the technology department provides to the business, including things like SLAs, how quickly incidents will be resolved, how quickly a new request for that particular service will be fulfilled. So all of those sorts of things go into your service catalogue. If we think then about the next level down, we might have a configuration management database. So that actually stores all of the technology items, so configuration items, which go into making the services or go into producing the services within the service catalogue. So a CMDB and a service catalogue are related to each other on 2 different levels. One is, this is a list of CIs that go into making our services, and these are the particular CIs that relate to a particular service. So a CMDB, if it's very immature, it will just be a flat list of stuff that we do in IT, and as it matures, it might start relating that stuff back to the individual services within our service catalogue. The supported SCC sits below the CMDB and is the list of all of the software within the CMDB. So you can see the supported software catalogue as a view or a subset of your CMDB. Now, a lot of people, again, because we think of the supported software catalogue from a request perspective, we think that the contents of our request catalogue are our supported software catalogue. But actually that's not the case, because if we are presenting a list of software to end users to select, we don't want them to see that they could select an Oracle database, do we? We only want them to be able to select a subset of the software that is authorised for use in the organisation. So the software request catalogue is in itself a subset of the supported software catalogue, so we can see that as being a view of the SSC as well. So if we we need to think about the SSC as slotting in between the configuration management database and the software request catalogue. So next up, we will talk about getting started. So Rory, do you want to pick that up and talk about how we might get started with building a supported software catalogue?
Yeah, and maybe I should have spent a bit more time looking at the slides coming forward, because I just wonder whether I'm going to quote a reference that you might have actually put in on the slides. But building out use cases is very important. So if you understand the arc of the software through potentially the IT department, but also other sort of sectors of the business and other departments of the business, then you start to call out the data that not only do you just use for a given title, but you use for a lot of titles over and over again. So it makes sense to document that information. Things like, for example, where you might store the file path and location for installing software, or the install package, and then the uninstall package as well, which is one that's often missed as well if you're going down the on-prem route. Things like, for example, you may have a power user or a software champion that actually sort of speaks up for that given software title. It's always that case that you never know who it is until you find out, you start asking. So teasing out that information as you start to onboard software is really quite important, but also understanding which processes, as the bullet point says there, which processes call upon that data and when do they call upon it. What you're going to find as well is that your SSC is, whilst it's it could be a go-to for a lot of data and information, it may not necessarily be the golden source of that information. So understanding where that data comes from and also who owns that data is equally very important, because it's all very well saying, oh, well, we'll just take that API and we'll plug it into the contracts database and we'll get all that information that we need to support product X, Y, and Z. I guarantee the CFO will have something to say about that. It won't happen. 9 times out of 10, it'll be some sort of DMZ Excel spreadsheet, hand-cranked import exercise that you have to go through. So understanding the data owner, the system owner, the permissions, all of these things actually play into, I guess, the maturity of your catalogue and just what sort of information you're in a position to store to support the rest of the business with those titles.
Yeah, who will use it and how they're going to use it is really critical. But also the process is really critical. So we've created, as part of our process kit, we've done a RACI and a RACI map, which shows all of the process steps that we've identified in our process kit, and you can see very quickly what processes will use the supported software catalogue. They'll call upon it within the supported. They'll call upon the supported software catalogue within the process, or they will actually update the supported software catalogue. So understanding your processes and understanding how they consume the catalogue is going to be a really key driver for what content you need in your catalogue. So next is building the catalogue, and we need to define our metadata. So do you want to talk a bit more about that, Rory?
It would help to sort of take myself off mute, wouldn't it? Yeah, what type of data do you need? Well, it depends on what the use cases you actually call out in the first place will drag what data to the fore that you're going to actually use and reuse on a regular basis. I would say those scenarios where we're making coffee for the CIO as an example, you know, shelve the high level aspirations. Think about the life cycle of the software through the processes, through the organization. Find out who's going to get most immediate value, to be consulting on that information on a frequent basis. And it may not always be the SAM team. It could be procurement, it could be IT ops, it could be legal. One thing you didn't get from that previous slide when we showed the race EU chart there, the full chart goes off of about 20 columns of people, and I think that's conservative in the foundation. It probably runs to more in the advanced kit. So yeah, and that's really quite important to sort of engage with around that, you know, because they could have sort of those esoteric bits of information that you need to call upon quite frequently. Yeah, less is more. I think this is a valid point too, is that you start small and grow big. Just, you know, get the core information and keep chipping away and finding out those use cases. It's not unlike SAM in that regard. It's finding out where the catalog can offer value, and it doesn't mean to say that you've got to go big bang world class day one. It could be something that you improve upon over time. Then again, some things are compulsory, as the heading says there. So if you are starting this venture, this supported software catalog experience, you're going to find that a lot of the data that SAM can provide could be construed as core to that supported software catalog. So things like vendor, product name, version, edition, release, licensing metric. You might have a preferred, well, I don't know, preferred supplier would sit in the procurement side of life, but certainly there's a lot of information that SAM can put its hand to straight away. And I would say to certain software vendors as well, it's more than just a blacklist or a whitelist as well. Those use cases are going to break your blacklist and whitelist very, very quickly, and because it's too easy to do in a SAM suite. Oh, yes, we approve it. No, we don't. No, it's not just a case of having that information that's in the SAM suite. There are use cases beyond the SAM suite that the SSC is going to honour.
And if you want to align to or even get to the point of certifying against ISO 19770, you'll need to start tracking asset owners. And that's really about who's authorised to make decisions about the software. But I think another thing to think about when you're thinking about asset owners is what sort of decisions are different people making, because different people make different decisions about software. So, for instance, if a business unit wants to introduce a new piece of software in order to provide new functionality, that's a business decision. So that's something that the business owner will be driving and is interested in. A budget owner may be the person who's paying for the software, so they'll be very interested to understand the renewals process and be confident that we're not paying for licenses that we don't need. A technical owner will be making decisions about when software is patched or what patches are required, when software needs to be upgraded in order to keep the organization safe. So the concept of asset owner can be really is a simplistic one, but when you open it up and dig down into it, it suddenly becomes really very complex. So think carefully. It's really important to have an asset owner and know who that is, and the SSC is a great repository for storing that information. But do think carefully about the different aspects of decisions that need to be made for that software and the different people who are accountable for making those decisions, because you may actually find that you have 3 different owner fields, for instance. But again, start simple, and as your use cases demand a more complex solution, then you can start implementing it. Now, getting your data for the supported software catalog at the beginning requires you to pull in to identify the data sources. So your SAM suite is a really obvious place to go, because that will give you a really clear picture of what is deployed within the organization. Although, don't forget SaaS. You may find that your SAM suite doesn't include SaaS products, but actually, of course, SaaS is becoming more and more important. So pull out the data from your SAM suite, maybe compare that data with other data sources. So the CMDB is a great source of information about configuration items. And then you may find that, your AD or single sign-on system has a lot of information about what software is used in the organization. But although it feels like the more the merrier, actually what you have to do is you need to normalize that data, because unless you've got a very clear sense of the individual titles within your organization, you're double counting effectively. You're going to not really know definitively what software you're dealing with. So just pick the 1, 2, maximum maybe 3 sources of data that will give you a really good cross set of the software used within your organization, and then cross-reference them to come up with a definitive picture of what titles are used in your environment. We already talked about So when you then decide what data you require, so what metadata you require and what's about each individual software title, you need to identify the data owners. And these are the people who, A, have accountability for this data, and B, it might be another group of people who can provide you with access to the data you need to fill out the details of the supported software catalog, to fill out your metadata. So you need to work out where each piece of metadata is coming from, how you're going to maintain and update it, and then how you get access to it initially. You also need to bear in mind that those data owners are going to change through time. So they may leave the organization and a new set of people come in. The software, you're going to introduce new software to your organization, so you need to understand where the metadata for the new piece of software is coming from. Introducing new software or removing software may trigger other requirements like training requirements and that sort of thing as well. So there is a bigger picture to managing and maintaining the data within your supported software catalog. And the maintenance is really, really key. So understanding what the technology roadmap will be. Are you looking at swapping out your discovery technology or your ITSM tool at some point? Are you looking at changing resellers, for instance? So being on top of those sorts of changes is also really important to make sure that you can manage and update the data within the supported software catalog. Do you want to talk to this slide, Rory?
Yeah, I can do. And one thing about having a catalog is there's a great temptation just to let the thing run feral, and that you've got this idea that we just add another title, we add another title, and we keep going and we keep going. But really, if you think about it, your catalog is the definitive list of software you have declared necessary to run the organization. And if you don't keep on top of that list, then you are dividing the time and attention you can give to the software on a per application basis. So don't be afraid to have that sort of culling exercise at the end to trim the dead wood out, if you will. And that's not to say that you necessarily have to get rid of all the information. You can just categorize it as as no longer fit for purpose, because what you don't want to have are those odd requests that might come back in the future. Somebody asks for Office 98 and it sort of makes it all the way through to a software approvals process because nobody's given it any thought when it should have been dismissed at the point of request. So just do keep on top of that husbandry, if you will, of the list. If you're in a position to, certain titles will just span across all IT and business services. I'm just going back to the top bullet there. If you're in a position from within the catalog to be able to align them to IT and business services, fantastic. That's really good and really lucky. But you're going to find a lot of, particularly desktop titles, they won't sort of pigeonhole so neatly. They'll just sit over sort of, generic office use or whatever. So you just have to live with it. What's the final bullet point there? It's all about the processes. Yeah, that's very important. It only include data that will be called on by a process and which has a process to maintain it as well. So I'm struggling to think what sort of data you could put against a software title that wouldn't necessarily
in the next slide, Rory, don't worry.
Be necessary. Oh, good. I'm glad you've got some examples then. But yeah, it's that thing of whilst you're tasked with looking after the software and how it's being applied in the organization, try not to the maintenance of the catalog your job. It shouldn't be that case. So just watch out for those columns as they get added, because there could be serial overhead there if you just run riot with it.
Yeah. So this is a worked example of how we would include data within our catalog, and examples of the processes which update the items. So this is pulled from the licenseware supported software catalog application that they've created. So you can see it's Windows Server Data Center 2022. We've got information about the description and, even potentially a link to the website so that techies who want to investigate the software a bit further know where to go, or if it was an end user piece of software, it might be an opportunity for an end user to say, okay, is this the right piece of software for me, by directing them to the website. You can find that sort of information. You might identify it as part of the new software approval process. So as part of your architectural forums and your service introduction process, right, what is the software we're introducing? What does it do? Where are we getting it from? You could even, potentially things like who are we buying it from, that sort of thing, pulling that in. If it's going to be used, that information. If it's not going to be used, then don't. Then there might be a load of other stuff that comes out or that we establish when we're actually thinking about what the service wrap looks like. How are we managing incidents? How are we managing the request process? How are we managing the contract review process? How are we ensuring discovery? The vendor onboarding process focuses on making sure that all of those things are answered. And that's where we'll start pulling out, okay, this is the addition, it's an operating system piece of software. This is, techies who are trying to manage this software. This is a basic description of how the licensing works. That information might be when you pull that out when you're first introducing it. And then the price is something that probably will be updated more regularly. And so we might have a step in the contract review process to update the supported software catalog with any changes in price. So it's really, really important to make sure that each piece of data that you maintain within the catalog has either a process or a procedure that updates it. And the other thing to start thinking about is how can you automate that update? So, for some pieces of software, it might be the contract review process that updates the price. For others, it might actually just be that you're importing a reseller price list through an API. So, think about all those things as well to really make sure, A, that it's accurate, B, that you're keeping it updated and maintained. So as you build out your RACI and your RACIU and you're thinking about each piece of metadata and where the information comes from, you're going to find that the supported software catalog touches a lot of processes. So for instance, this mapping exercise shows which processes update the software status in the supported software catalog and which processes are triggered when the supported software catalog is updated. So an example being, if we're introducing a new piece of software, we put it through the software packaging process, and once it's ready to be deployed, we can update the status to say that that is now a standard piece of software. However, when that piece of software is old or it's being upgraded, so we need to upgrade the new piece of software and we need to remove the old piece of software, we may say, right, we need to trigger the software removal process. And if that piece of software has a contract associated with it, we might want to terminate the contract, go through the contract termination process. So this is another way of making sure that our use cases and the way the software supported catalog is used within your management system, your software asset management system, is that you don't have any gaps, so that your data flows and the way your processes work have no gaps where things start to go wrong. So, does anybody have any thoughts or questions? And please put your thoughts or comments in the chat if you don't mind, because there's quite a few of us. Rory, have you got any other comments you'd like to make about what we've talked about so far while we're waiting for people to put stuff in the chat?
I think I have to give a shout out when I because I've written a paper on this for the Sam Charter website way back when. I have to give a shout out to one of the more interesting use cases that I came across when I was briefly at the University of Leeds. I was speaking to somebody in procurement, and they talked about the value of having a tipping point value against each application. And I was like, okay, what do you mean? And what they were getting at was that all the dribs and drabs that come in of purchasers, once you hit that sort of value of installations, whatever it may be, say 75, 100, whatever the value is, that's the point at which something, a software title or a vendor makes it onto an approved list. Then at that point, and you negotiate through a contract rather than buying in the ones and twos. And I think it's a great way of understanding where software sits in respect of your tail, or shall we say, your more sort of key core operational software titles or software vendors that you deal with.
Yeah, and that's particularly becoming far more important as we expand our SaaS environments and our SaaS estate, because SaaS is so many software as a service applications are really nifty, inventive ways of approaching very specific problems. And so we'll find that a lot of business units start using SaaS because they're experimenting with it with a particular title. So, if there's only one or two installation or usage people using a particular SaaS title, you probably don't need to put a really strong management wrap around it. But as it goes viral and more people get excited about it and more people start using it, then you might want to start bringing tighter management around it and potentially making it something that other people could request as well. So, making it public or whatever. So that's something that more and more people need to be thinking about. And, and again, if you're starting to do that sort of thing, then that's the sort of thing. At what point do you introduce a piece of SaaS software into your supported software catalog? Is it the moment somebody takes out their credit card and starts experimenting with it, or do you wait until you've got 100 subscriptions or 500 subscriptions or whatever? So there's these sorts of policy things to think about when you're defining your supported software catalog too. So we don't have anything in chat, so we'll move on. Right, using the catalog. Right, so Rory, do you want to talk to this slide?
Yeah, we can do. So no one wants to trawl through a long list of software. Absolutely right. So this is, I think, where as the main title suggests, it's views, and getting views right in respect to the catalog is going to make sure that it remains sticky and applicable to the entire organization. You're going to have certain use cases that you're going to need. So to address your typical end user, they're only going to want to see a certain slice of the data. So that initial sort of that software request is the obvious point where a catalog can be consulted. They're pretty much only going to settle on the vendor, the title, and if they are showing any nous, they might want to pick the version or edition, but that's going to be about it. So being able to tailor that view, that UX experience is going to be absolutely vital. You then take project members, of course. They're going to have a different perspective on what's acceptable to them. They're the ones who are going to be wanting to request the back office and high powered, high value titles that we see in data centers and in the cloud, etc. And talking of the cloud, one sort of symbol we don't have there potentially are the DevOps crowd. They potentially may want to have that catalog that is wide as it is long. So taking into their experience in all of this is really quite important too. We've got service desk there as well. Of course, they'll be interested in the, shall we say, the more nitty-gritty stuff, the version, the edition, that kind of information. That's going to sort of play to any sort of tech support requirements that they might have in regards to supporting software as well. They would be more interested in who is the software owner, because they may have information that could help resolve a call. So it's thinking through what information you need and when. That will help shape those views.
So this diagram shows the views in practice, I guess you could say. So you might have a catalogue which is the standard items that everybody can request. And so everybody can see that view of the catalogue. But if you're in HR, there may be additional specific software that as an HR user, you need to be able to request, but we don't want non-HR users to be able to request that, because then they shouldn't have it fundamentally. So for instance, might be payroll software. And different teams and different projects, you might have a specific views for specific projects, as we said before. So you think of them as being additive as well. So these are views on top of what everybody can see and request. Presenting views to people are an example of guardrails. So you're only seeing them only presenting a view to them that you are happy for them to select from or happy for them to see that information. So guide rails are where we provide additional information to help people make a decision. And so whereas we build guide rails into the technology, so we're only showing the software that we want those specific people to choose from, we might actually provide additional information as a guide rail to help them make their decision. And an example of that might be providing pricing information. They may perfectly have the permission, and they're perfectly authorized to select a free version or a paid for version of the same piece of software. But if we clearly flag up to them that this version is free and it does these things, and this version is paid and it does these extra things, then we're giving them the information to make the decision, actually, you know what, the free version is going to be enough for me, so I'm going to select the free version. Or they may say, no, you know what, I genuinely do need to have the paid version, so I'm going to select that one. And another way of building out guide rails and guardrails and presenting views to your stakeholders is to integrate your tools. So if you integrate the supported software catalogue with other systems, you can make the information available to people when and where they need it. So a couple of examples here are when we provide the software status to the service desk, so they can see immediately in their service management tool that a particular piece of software has been that's been requested is a legacy piece of software, so they know that they can then need to route that call, or we could even automate the routing of that call through an additional approvals process to get the approval required to install an additional copy of a legacy software title onto the estate. On the other hand, if we're a line manager, we may find that we in order to approve a software request, we want to see the price so that we can check whether or not it's in our budget. So if we include the price of the software in the approval email plus a quick description of what that software does, then instead of them hunting around and coming back and saying, sorry, how much is this again? Sorry, why do you need this? Remind me, I've forgotten. The information they need to approve the software is in the email, and they can go click, I approve immediately. So it's speeding things up. So once you've got that SSC in place and the baseline information is in there, thinking about what decisions people make and what information you present to them and where to help them make those decisions is a really powerful way of improving your overall IT service levels. So does anybody have any other comments or questions before we move on? We're nearly at the end, you'll be pleased to know. Does anybody have any other thoughts about what we've talked about? Rory, where have you seen a supported software catalogue in practice?
My head.
Yeah.
Really, I don't. Any of the engagements I've had, I've always put the catalogue in front of people. Go, oh yeah, great idea, great idea. Yes, we need that. We need that as a means of funneling, as a means of control. But what I tend to find is that people don't keep me around too often to see things to maturity or fruition. The other thing is generating data, which would be the ideal state for me to see that actually what I've advocated as a process actually works. Yeah. But certain organisations I think that have sought to drive SAM through or in consolidation with service management do have them in. So my most recent engagement at the moment with a certain public sector organisation, I had to. Oh, I didn't have to. I wanted to get a copy of Visio. It was all driven through a web-based front end that integrated with ServiceNow.
Right. I've seen it in practice in a financial organisation, and it was a really good one because it actually wasn't request focused. It was very much focused towards technical people who were using software, developing it, configuring it, and it really gave them all the information they needed about where they could use a particular Oracle database, for instance, or SQL and that sort of thing. So that was really powerful for the technical people to make sure that everybody understood what the guidelines were around using software. So that was a really good case as well. So nobody has any questions or comments. My goodness, either we've done a fantastic job or everyone's fallen asleep, Rory.
that I think they're thinking about a change of career. Yeah. I'm just wondering whether we've got a question. What with SaaS?
Yeah, so SaaS definitely needs to be in your software catalog, and it's becoming a larger and larger proportion of the estate. So it's not, we cannot restrict our catalog to just thinking about what is on premise. And Helmut's further added, yes, you will have application owners outside of IT for SaaS, and that's absolutely correct. So and this is where we come back to what we were talking about, business owners. So and different types of owners who will make different decisions about the different aspects of the software. So from a SaaS perspective, it's very much a business driven decision, because it's the business wants to experiment and explore with SaaS, or they've got a particular SaaS product that they want to use. So they'll make that decision, they want to use it, they'll own the budget. And then there might be some other decisions around, do we know where the data is stored, and are we happy for it to be in that particular jurisdiction? All of those sorts of issues. But yes, SaaS is very business driven, but we still need to have it in the catalogue so that we understand the core elements of the SaaS. So ensure, and then, sorry, go on, Rory.
I was just going to say, because I think in the way we've modelled it, the point that sort of initial point of request is where SaaS comes to the attention of the business. So typically an end user or maybe a project manager might request a title that is new, and it doesn't matter whether the title is on-prem or whether it's SaaS or whether it's IaaS. It's irrelevant. The business should still put that software title through its due diligence, and the point at which it passes the due diligence, it gets added to the catalogue for others to sort of make requests on then at that point. So to Pierce's point, how do you highlight compliance to the SEC? Well, that then requires you to start reporting on software on the IT estate that is not on the catalogue, and that's a pruning exercise then that takes place, and either you pounce on people who've installed illegally, or indeed you start to sunset those installations that perhaps have made it through previous purges that haven't sort of taken, and maybe go through a replacement exercise.
Yep, or you say, actually, okay, they were experimenting with this piece of software. It's something we definitely want to use. Let's put it through the new software approvals process so that it becomes authorized. So we're actually regularizing that piece of software and adding it to the supported software catalog. Because I think it's really important for us to recognize that we're here because the business is trying to achieve something. Our organizations are trying to achieve something, and we need to be careful not to be blocking. So our supported software catalog needs to reflect the reality of what's going on. But you do need to regularly assess what's in the catalog, both to make sure the catalog is accurate and as Rory said, capture any scenarios where people have introduced software and it's not been through the authorized processes, and then understand what went wrong so that you can try and prevent it from happening in future. But you also need to actually look at your catalog and say, we've got 3 different pieces of software that do the same thing here, and then work with the decision makers within IT and within the business to say, can we reduce that down to 2 or even 1? So regularly looking after and understanding your catalog can actually also drive software rationalization decisions as well. You can't make those decisions, but you can flag them up as decisions and actions to be taken if the organization or the business wishes it. So Mariana has said, what would you say is the biggest challenge in trying to implement an SSC? What's your thoughts, Rory?
So my thoughts would be, in the first instance, it's probably how SAM is set up, in that we go through that pain of audit, buy a tool, produce a compliance report, go through several more audits, and what are we doing here? In reality, if you take that sort of step back approach and actually start to look at the titles that are required to drive the business and run the business, it's going down another level. So if you do onboard a given vendor, you don't onboard everything that the vendor ever sort of installed on your IT estate. You sort of put it under the microscope and say, we'll take titles A, B, C, and D, but titles X, Y, and Z, no, we don't want them. So let's go through that pruning exercise as we onboard, and your onboarding should drive the population of your catalog then at that point.
And often those are very political decisions. So they're not our decisions to make, but we need to work with technical people and the business to understand whether that's what we want to do and what the implications of that are. But you can still take your statuses within your supported software catalog and say that the stuff that you don't want there is, say, legacy, and that becomes a signpost that says we don't want to install any more of this, and actually this is the standard product. So actually, even just putting in place that information about what software is a legacy software, what software is standard, what is an exception standard, because this particular team need it for a particular purpose, but we don't want anybody else installing that particular piece of software. They act as guardrails to inform people and actually help gradually bring the estate under better management. So I have a slightly different view. For me, it's all about maintaining the supported software catalog and the data within it, Rory. When you're first starting to build one, everybody looks at it and says, oh, that's such an amazing idea. I want this piece of information to be in there. Can we track this, please? Can we do this? Can we do that? And it rapidly becomes a monster. It becomes a many-headed hydra that is impossible to maintain. So you have to kiss your catalog. You have to keep it simple, because otherwise it just becomes impossible to build and impossible to maintain. So really being really ruthless about what is in that catalog and keeping it as simple as possible, and only expanding the information and data within it when there's a really strong use case to do so. You can see really clearly that it's going to absolutely enhance the way people work and the people manage IT, but also that the particular addition to in terms of the metadata to the catalog can be maintained. There's a clear process that updates it, and there's a clear process that uses that piece of information. That's the biggest challenge I've always grappled with. So do we have any other questions or comments? Yes, Helmut, absolutely. Align the SSC with the architectural roadmap. Absolutely spot on. And Thomas says, what's your recommendation? Should the SSC include only software allowed within the organisation, or should the SSC also explicitly mention software which are allowed but not recommended and not allowed? What's your thoughts, Rory? You're on mute. Mute.
Thank you. Sorry. Yeah, definitely the latter situation that you highlighted there, Thomas, because it's that Office 98 scenario that I highlighted previously. You could be on Office 365 and happy with Office 2019 and maybe even Office 2016, but anything before that previously used to be okay. But now we've said no, we're not patching and maintaining version control on those legacy versions. So you want it to be there to be able to reject it instantly, if you know what I mean. So that somebody would not then request, oh, I want Office 2012 because of X, Y, and Z. No, we've already made that decision that we're not running with 2012 anymore because of whatever reasons. We're now on 2016, 19, or 365.
Yeah, but I would say that if you're starting out your supported software catalog, start simple and just have a blacklist. And then as you mature, start building out that sense of actually, no, we don't want to use this piece of software anymore. It's legacy. We want to get rid of it. Or it's an exception piece of software because, you know, this particular department use a particular application that only works with a particular version of Internet Explorer, and that's surprisingly common. So we're not installing Internet Explorer anywhere anymore. Everyone only gets Edge or whatever, or Google Chrome or whatever it might be, except for this department, so that they have an exception. So this is a classic case of start simple in a way that starts fulfilling a need, and then as that need evolves and people become more reliant on the information in the SSC, start building it out. So I hope that's helpful. Anybody else before we go? Right. So
yeah, well, it could be, Thomas, that it's not binary, it's not black or white. It could be. I think when I drafted the supported software catalog process first time round, I suggested possibly a traffic light system. So you could have, you know, red, amber, green. You know, amber stays on the IT estate, but we have a green title, we have a preferred title, and then we have a legacy, or we do not want to use red title. The entry stays in the catalog, but it's not presented as part of a view to end users to pick in the first place.
Exactly. And I think as you mature, your category of software will expand. So for instance, as you start service introduction, you might have an emerging category. So all the software that's coming through the approval process and a service introduction process, you put it in the SSC, but you put it as an emerging category. So because you know that over the next year or so, you're going to be rolling that out. So, but as I said, build up, absolutely build up, so that each time you add an additional category, there's a really clear need that category is fulfilling. Open source, should it be included in the SSC? Now that's an interesting one, and I would say for many organizations, no. But if you're a big user of open source and you do a lot of software development, maybe. But again, think very carefully about what need that is fulfilling.
Okay, so we've got one more from Helmut here. What is your thought of a product called Other Software, and link this request towards a value board or CAB? I presume this would be the exceptional case, is it, whereby somebody is requesting a red title or something that is not approved? Is that where you're going with that? And I'm sorry that I'm talking and you're typing. To get control on software requests outside the SSC. Well, again, how we've modeled it in the request process, if something is presented to the business that is not on the SCC, then it's a free form field. Off we go to the software approvals process to see whether it can sit on the catalog, but they come back with a decision fairly quick to say yes or no accordingly.
And this is what we're saying about special treatment for SaaS, because you know, the business want to explore and experiment with different software as a service solutions. So you, depending on your business, you may want to encourage that innovation. Certainly, I worked with an advertising firm where innovation was absolutely everything to this firm, and so the business could absolutely go and buy a piece of SaaS software and have a play with it and decide whether they wanted it or not. And actually, that was encouraged because that was this business was on the cutting edge of innovation. So we had to accommodate that. So I think this is where you need to also think about aligning to your broader business, and at what point do you want to actually formalize how you manage software, at which point you introduce it to the SSC. Right, so let's just go back and look at the last slide, which is our top tips. So Rory, what's your top tips? We've got a few on the slide.
What does it say there? Keep on top of your JML process. That's more about recycling, I think, than anything else. Unless
oh no, I think it's maintaining it so that, making sure that as people leave, people who controlled the data you need for your SSC, that gets updated.
Oh, I see. Yes, no, very valid point, because it's that thing my father used to say way back when. It's companies trade, but it's people that do business, and it's no different internally as well. It's just don't rely on the APIs. That's all I will say, because I guarantee people will roll through jobs, they'll change positions, they'll leave companies, etc. And all of a sudden, it'll be that use case whereby, oh, I just need to speak to Tom, Mary, or Fred, and they've gone on, they've moved on. So then you've got to go through that whole thing of forging new relationships just to make a request. It's just a major pain in the arse if you haven't done it beforehand.
Yeah. My top tip is very much about keep it simple. Like I said before, if you don't have a clear way of updating and maintaining the data in the supported software catalog, exclude it, and make sure that people use the data before you even attempt to include it. Otherwise it just becomes a beast that just runs completely out of control. Anything else, Rory? Any last word?
Yeah, have classification in there, because the rationalization is going to be really powerful to you as well. It's all very well looking at sort of technology roadmaps to see when titles should be sunsetted. You may have your own technology roadmap as well, which sunsets or gets rid of software ahead of that sort of, software support expiry date. So being driven by the business as to what should be in the catalog is equally very important. But have a classification field in there so that how many PDF readers do you really need? How many instances of Linux and Unix do you really need? Being able to consolidate that makes procurement's life a lot easier. It makes your life a lot easier as well.
Yeah. So thank you very much, everybody. We're always happy to talk. And we'd just like to say thanks so much to the Licenseware guys who polished the slide for us, because neither Rory or I are brilliant designers. And Chris has also been recording it. So the recording will be available on YouTube when it's ready. And if you want to contact the Licenseware guys, then please do. There's their details there. And if you want to have a chat with either myself or Rory about the supported software catalog or anything in general, please do drop us a line, and we're very happy to have a 30-minute or an hour chat or whatever with you. And if you would like to buy the kit, there's the link there. And we also mentioned the RACEU chart, which is available, as I said previously, it's available for download on the website. The presentation will also be available for download on the website when I figure out how to print a PDF from Canva, which hopefully will be sometime this week. So I think that's it, really. Thank you very much, everybody, and we hope to see you again soon.
Thank you, guys. All the best.